The jungle stretched out before me like a vast green ocean. I stood on the edge of a high cliff, the humid air thick in my lungs. Below the canopy was an unbroken sea of leaves, a world of its own, hiding secrets and dangers. In my hand I clutched a brittle piece of parchment, a map drawn by a man who never returned. It was my only guide, my only hope. This was the Amazon, the very heart of the world's greatest wilderness. The sun beat down, turning the sweat on my brow into steam. Every explorer dreams of a moment like this, standing on the precipice of the unknown, with a legend drawing them forward. El Dorado. The name itself was a prayer and a curse. This wilderness is unforgiving. It tests you at every turn. You have to respect it, understand its rhythms, or it will swallow you whole. The heat is relentless, a constant pressure that saps your strength. The map felt fragile, its edges frayed from countless nights of study by candlelight. It promised a city of gold, a prize beyond imagination. But looking out at that endless green, I knew the real prize was survival. The journey ahead would be a brutal test of will, a battle against nature itself. Every step into that jungle would be a step away from the world I knew, a step deeper into a place where the old rules no longer applied. The sounds of the jungle were a constant symphony of life and death. The screech of a macaw, the buzz of 1,000 insects, the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. But beneath it all, there was another sound, the faint, rhythmic pulse that seemed to come from the very earth itself. A drum beat. It was distant, almost too quiet to hear, but it was there. It was a message, a warning. Someone was watching. This land was not empty. We were intruders here, and the jungle's guardians were aware of our presence. That steady beat was a reminder that we were not alone in this immense wilderness. My name is Alejandro da Silva, and I have chased this dream across an ocean. I left Spain with a king's blessing and a ship full of brave men. Now, only a handful of us remained, hardened by the journey but haunted by the comrades we lost. The jungle had already claimed so many. Disease, predators, the sheer exhaustion of the march. But the legend of El Dorado was a powerful lure. It was a fire in the blood that pushed us onward even when every instinct screamed to turn back. As I folded the map and placed it back inside my leather pouch, I made a silent vow. I would find this city, or this jungle would become my tomb. We descended from the cliffs and entered the jungle proper. The world changed, instantly. The open sky vanished, replaced by a dense ceiling of leaves that blocked out the sun. Light filtered down in strange, shifting patterns, painting the forest floor in shades of emerald and gold. The air grew heavy, saturated with the smell of damp earth and decaying vegetation. This is what I call the green hell. It's a place of incredible beauty, but also incredible danger. Every vine can hide a snake. Every shadow can conceal a predator. You must stay alert. Your senses are your best weapon in a place like this. The humidity is a physical weight. It clings to your skin, soaks your clothes, and makes every breath a conscious effort. We moved in single file, hacking a path through the thick undergrowth with our machetes. The work was exhausting. Within an hour, our arms ached and our bodies were slick with sweat. The jungle fought back with every step. Thorny vines snagged our clothes, and razor-sharp leaves cut our skin. The ground itself was treacherous, a tangled mess of roots and mud that threatened to trip us at any moment. Survival here is a minute-by-minute battle. You have to conserve your energy and watch your footing. The jungle is alive, and it is loud. The noise is constant, an overwhelming chorus of insects, birds, and monkeys. But it's the things you don't see that you fear the most. We heard the guttural growl of a jaguar nearby, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. We saw the tracks of massive tapirs in the mud. This place is ruled by creatures perfectly adapted to this environment. We, in our heavy armor and thick boots, were clumsy outsiders. We were prey. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the leaves made us jump, our hands instinctively reaching for our swords. Our progress was painfully slow. What looked like a short distance on the map could take a full day to cross on the ground. The jungle disorients you, confuses your sense of direction. Without a compass and the sun to guide us, we would be lost in minutes. The men were growing weary, their faces etched with a mixture of determination and fear. They looked to me for strength, for reassurance, but as I looked into the endless green maze ahead, I felt a familiar knot of doubt tighten in my stomach. El Dorado was our goal, but the jungle was our immediate enemy, and it was an enemy that never slept. After days of hacking through the oppressive jungle, we reached the river. The map called it the Rio Serpiente, the Serpent River. It was a wide, muddy artery flowing deep into the heart of the continent. This was our new path, a promise of faster travel. We built crude rafts from balsa wood, lashing them together with strong vines. Pushing off from the bank felt like a release, a small victory against the suffocating forest. The current was slow and steady, carrying us deeper into the unknown. The air was cooler here, and a thick mist clung to the water's surface, especially in the mornings. It was like drifting through a dream. The river journey had its own set of challenges. The fog was a disorienting blanket, reducing visibility to just a few feet. We had to navigate by sound, listening for the rush of rapids or the telltale splash of a submerged rock. The men were quiet, their voices hushed by the eerie silence of the mist. All we could hear was the gentle lapping of water against our rafts and the distant calls of unseen birds. This quiet was more unnerving than the jungle's roar. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. In this environment, your imagination can be your worst enemy. As we drifted, we began to see signs of those who had come before. Not other explorers, but the indigenous people of this land. Carved stones started to appear along the riverbanks. They were weathered and ancient, covered in moss and vines. The carvings depicted strange figures with elongated heads and animals we had never seen before. Some stones were shaped like snarling jaguars or coiled serpents. They were markers, warnings. They told us we were entering a sacred, forbidden territory. The craftsmanship was incredible, a testament to a culture that was deeply connected to this wild place. These artifacts filled us with a mix of wonder and unease. They proved that a complex civilization existed here, one capable of such artistry. This fueled our belief in El Dorado. A people who could carve these stones could surely build a city of gold. But the carvings also felt like silent guardians, watching us pass. The men would stare at them, their expressions a mix of fascination and dread. We were following a path laid out by others, and we had no idea where it would truly lead. The river was taking us to our destination, but it felt like we were being pulled into a trap. The feeling of being watched intensified. It was no longer just a suspicion, it was a certainty. We would be poling our rafts close to the bank, and I would catch a flicker of movement in the dense foliage. A flash of a painted face, the glint of an obsidian spear tip in the dappled light. They were there, just beyond the veil of leaves, the indigenous warriors of the Amazon. They moved through the trees with a silence and grace that was supernatural. They were masters of camouflage, blending perfectly with their surroundings. They were ghosts in their own land, and we were the clumsy intruders. The men were on edge. Their fear was a palpable thing, a scent on the humid air. They would jump at every sound, their eyes darting nervously towards the jungle walls that lined the river. Sleep became a luxury few could afford. We posted sentries on the rafts at night, but it felt like a futile gesture. How can you guard against an enemy you cannot see? An arrow could fly from the darkness at any moment, silent and deadly. Their presence was a constant psychological pressure, wearing us down, fraying our nerves. This is a classic guerrilla tactic. Let the enemy defeat himself with fear. One evening, as dusk settled over the river, we saw them clearly for the first time. Not just a fleeting glimpse, but a full war party. They stood on a high bank, silhouetted against the blood-red sky. There were dozens of them, tall and proud, their bodies covered in intricate paint. They held long spears and powerful bows. They didn't make a sound. They just stood and watched as our rafts drifted past. It was a chilling display of power. They could have rained 100 arrows down on us, ended our expedition right there, but they didn't. They were showing us that our lives were in their hands. That encounter changed everything. The abstract fear became a concrete reality. The legend of El Dorado suddenly seemed less important than the immediate threat of survival. The men began to murmur, some speaking of turning back. They had signed on for gold and glory, not to be hunted like animals in a hostile wilderness. I had to rally them, to remind them of the prize that lay ahead, but even as I spoke words of courage, I felt the cold grip of fear myself. These warriors were part of the jungle, and we were fighting the jungle itself. It was a battle we were destined to lose. The river grew too treacherous, choked with rapids and waterfalls, forcing us back onto the land. The jungle welcomed us back with its familiar misery. We abandoned our rafts and began the march again, our spirits low. The terrain became steeper, a series of rolling hills that drained our energy with every step. The air was stagnant, thick with moisture and the buzzing of mosquitoes. And with the mosquitoes came the fever. It started with one man, then two, then a third. The burning heat that turned their skin to fire, followed by violent shivers that shook their entire bodies. Malaria, the silent killer of the tropics. Caring for the sick slowed us down to a crawl. We had no proper medicine, only a few native herbs a friendly coastal tribe had shown us, but they did little. The sick men became a heavy burden, their delirious ramblings filling the nights. Their comrades had to carry them in makeshift litters, a task that doubled their exhaustion. Morale plummeted. The healthy men looked at the sick with a mixture of pity and terror, knowing they could be next. The jungle was no longer just a physical obstacle. It was poisoning us from within. Every mosquito bite was a potential death sentence. The jungle itself seemed to be decaying around us. The trees were draped in thick, rotting moss, and strange fungi grew on the forest floor, some glowing with an eerie light in the darkness. The smell of rot was overpowering. It felt like we were walking through a giant graveyard. The pressure of it all was immense. I had to be the rock for my men, the unwavering leader, but at night, alone in my hammock, the doubt crept in. Was El Dorado real? Or was it just a fever dream, a golden mirage that was leading us all to our deaths in this green hell? We were losing the fight. We had lost more men to sickness and exhaustion than to any predator or native arrow. The original company of 50 was now down to less than 20. The survivors were gaunt figures, their faces hollowed out by hunger and despair. Their armor was rusted, their clothes were in tatters. We were a ghost expedition, haunted by the memory of our dead companions and the specter of our own mortality. But we pushed on. The map said we were close. It was that single desperate hope that kept our feet moving, one agonizing step at a time. Our path now followed a narrow, winding canyon carved by a small tributary of the great river. The rock walls rose high on either side, blocking out what little sunlight reached the jungle floor. The air here was cool and damp, a welcome relief from the oppressive heat, but the place had a sinister feel. The walls of the canyon were covered in carvings, far more intricate and disturbing than the ones we had seen on the river. They all depicted a single motif, the giant serpent. It was shown coiled around men, swallowing the sun, its body forming the very landscape we were walking through. The symbolism was clear. We were walking into the serpent's maw. This canyon was a sacred passage, and the carvings were warnings to the uninitiated. The detail was incredible. In some places, the serpent's scales were inlaid with polished stones that seemed to glitter in the dim light. My men were unnerved, crossing themselves as they passed the more grotesque images. The silence in the canyon was absolute, broken only by the echo of our own footsteps. It felt like a tomb, a place where sound and life came to die. The atmosphere was thick with ancient mystery and a powerful sense of dread. The canyon twisted and turned, a natural labyrinth designed to confuse and disorient. At times, the path would split, and we had to rely on the map and my compass to choose the correct way. It felt like a deliberate test. The builders of this path did not want it to be found easily. They had used the natural landscape to create a series of puzzles and obstacles. A wrong turn could lead to a dead end, or worse, a hidden trap. We spotted several deep pits near the edge of the path, cleverly concealed with branches and leaves. This was a place designed to kill intruders. As we ventured deeper, the air grew colder and carried a strange metallic scent. The sound of dripping water echoed all around us like a slow, steady clock ticking down our final moments. The psychological toll was immense. The constant darkness, the menacing carvings, the feeling of being trapped between the high canyon walls, it was all designed to break the spirit. Some of my men started seeing things in the shadows, their minds playing tricks on them. The serpent was not just carved into the rock, it was coiling around our minds, infesting our thoughts with fear and paranoia. We were in the belly of the beast. The canyon finally opened up, but into a landscape of ruin. We emerged onto a high plateau that must have once been a grand causeway. Now it was a broken path. A massive earthquake centuries ago had shattered the stone road. Huge chasms split the ground, some of them hundreds of feet deep. To continue, we had to navigate this treacherous maze of broken rock. The path that remained was narrow and crumbled at the edges. A single misstep would mean a fall into the darkness below. This was the final guardian of El Dorado, a test of balance and nerve. The scale of the destruction was awe-inspiring. Massive carved flagstones, each weighing several tons, were tossed about like pebbles. It spoke of a cataclysmic event, a power of nature that had humbled even the city's great builders. It also explained why the city had been lost for so long. This broken causeway was a near-impassable barrier. We had to use ropes to lower ourselves down into the chasms and climb up the other side. The work was slow and perilous. The rock was slick with moss, and loose stones would frequently rain down from above. The air at this altitude was thin, making every exertion twice as difficult. We were high above the main jungle now, in a world of rock, wind, and sky. From here, we could see the green canopy stretching to the horizon in every direction. We were an island in the sky, completely isolated. The view was breathtaking, but it also reinforced our sense of utter separation from the world. There was no turning back. The journey back across this broken path would be just as dangerous as the journey forward. Our only choice was to press on and pray the map was true. It was on this broken path that we found the final clue. A single stylized carving on an overturned pillar. It was the serpent again, but this time its head pointed towards a specific peak in the distance, a mountain whose summit was perpetually shrouded in cloud. The map confirmed it. Our destination lay just beyond that peak. A surge of energy went through us. We were close. The exhaustion and fear were momentarily forgotten, replaced by a raw, desperate excitement. El Dorado was within our grasp. We redoubled our efforts, moving with a renewed sense of purpose across the shattered remains of the ancient road. After conquering the broken path, we began the final ascent. The climb was steep, a grueling trek through a cloud forest. Here, the trees were smaller, twisted into strange shapes by the constant wind. Everything was draped in a thick, dripping moss, and ghostly mists swirled around us, obscuring the path ahead. The world became a gray, silent place. The air was thin and cold, a stark contrast to the sweltering jungle below. It felt like we were ascending into another world, a realm of spirits and echoes. The silence was profound, a sacred hush that seemed to guard the mountain's secrets. As we climbed higher, we started finding more signs of the lost civilization, not ruins, but artifacts, perfectly preserved by the cool, damp air. We found a small, golden figurine of a llama dropped by the side of the ancient trail. A little further, we discovered shattered pieces of ornate pottery, their colors still vibrant. These were not the treasures of a king's hoard, but the simple, everyday objects of a people. It made the city feel real, tangible. It was not just a legend. It was a place where people had lived, worked, and dreamed. These small discoveries were more thrilling than any tale of gold. The architecture of the path itself became more sophisticated. The rough trail gave way to beautifully laid stone steps, each one perfectly fitted without a speck of mortar. The precision was astonishing. The steps were slick with moss and centuries of rain, making the ascent treacherous, but their very existence was a marvel. They climbed relentlessly upwards, disappearing into the thick mist above. It felt like we were climbing a stairway to heaven. The men, though exhausted, were filled with a sense of wonder. We were walking in the footsteps of ghosts on a path that had not been trod for generations. The sounds changed, too. The silence was broken by the faint musical sound of running water. And then we saw them, a series of small stone aqueducts running alongside the staircase. They carried crystal-clear water down from the summit, a complex irrigation system that fed a series of terraced gardens carved into the mountainside. Though overgrown, the terraces were still visible, a testament to the incredible engineering skill of this lost culture. They had tamed the mountain itself. We were no longer just approaching a city. We were entering its domain. The sense of anticipation was almost unbearable. We broke through the last layer of mist and entered a wide, flat plaza, and there they were. Before us, set into the mountainside, were the gates. They were enormous, at least 40 feet high, and made of what looked like solid gold. The metal glowed with a soft, warm light, catching the first rays of sunlight that broke through the clouds. The surface was covered in intricate carvings depicting scenes of gods and kings, cosmic battles, and celestial journeys. It was the most magnificent thing I had ever seen. All the hardship and all the suffering of the journey melted away in that moment. We had found it. This was a true El Dorado. The gates hadn't been pristine. The jungle had tried to reclaim them. Dense, woody vines, as thick as a man's forearm, snaked across the golden surface, their green leaves a stark contrast with the gleaming metal. Moss grew in the deep crevices of the carvings, and a green carpet covered the stone threshold. The city wasn't deserted. It was asleep. It was a sleeping giant beneath a blanket of greenery. The sight was a strange and powerful blend of man-made grandeur and the untamed, unstoppable power of nature. It was both beautiful and terrifying. My men stood frozen, their mouths open. They dropped their packs and weapons and simply stared. Some fell to their knees, weeping with joy and relief, some whispering prayers. The air was thick with a mixture of triumph and profound awe. We had done the impossible. We had passed through hell and reached the gates of heaven. The wealth beyond those doors was unbelievable. It would make us richer than kings. But as I stood there, I felt something more than mere greed. I felt a deep, humble reverence for those who had built this place. But as the initial shock wore off, another feeling crept in. A cold, gnawing sense of dread. The gates were closed. No handle, no lock, no apparent way to open them. They were bolted shut, and the silence was deafening. There was no sound of life from within, no smoke rising from the chimneys, no sign of those who built this golden masterpiece. There was only the whisper of the wind among the vines and the distant call of a hawk. We had reached our destination, but the greatest mystery still loomed. What lay beyond the gates. And were we truly welcome here? The adventure was not over yet, it was only just beginning.